My dear Masala Podcast fans, I've written a book called Bad Daughter. You surprised by the title? I think not. I've never shared such deeply personal things before. I talk about growing up in poverty. I talk about my father's violence, my mother's murder. I talk about how I turned my pain into power, navigating mental health, sexuality, spirituality, and patriarchy. Bad Daughter is my story of going from Mumbai's slums to New York's billboards. But it's your story too. What's the message of this book? It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter what happened to you. You still get to have the life that you want. If you're looking for a book to move you and inspire you to change your life, type in Bad Daughter by Sangeeta Pillai on Amazon or go to my website baddaughter.co.uk.
Besharam, Badtameez, Chi.
I'm Sangeeta Pillai, and this is the Masala Podcast, where we talk about all those things that we're not supposed to talk about as South Asian women. Sex, sexuality, periods, menopause, mental health, nipple hair, shame, and many more taboos.
And when the girls are on their periods and they're thrown out of the house basically because they're considered dirty and impure.
It's time we heard the voices of real South Asian women, not just those we see in Bollywood or in mainstream Western media. It's time we had a real voice, a loud and proud and strong voice.
She said, "You mean you speak to God when you're on your period?" I said, "Of course I do." She said, "Doesn't he get angry with you?" I said, "Get angry with me?" I said, "He's the one who made me."
I've invited some incredible women to sit at my kitchen table, drink chai and put the world to rights. In this episode, I'm talking to Manjit Gill, founder and CEO of Binti, a charity devoted to providing basic menstrual rights for women in South Asian communities. Her vision is to create a world where all women have menstrual dignity. Binti has done some incredible work removing the sense of shame and stigma around periods, both among women in India as well as South Asian communities here in the UK. Manjit, correct me if I'm wrong, you were recognised by number 10 Downing Street. You had a letter and everything from the Prime Minister recognising the contribution you've made within the community. So it's really, really impressive. Thank you for speaking to me. Can we start by you telling me a little bit more about your kind of personal journey? What's brought you to this point to Binti?
So about 6 years ago, I used to work for the Sherry Blair Foundation as a mentor for a young lady in Nairobi. I've always been in business development and worked on a global field, so I've thought that I could give her some expertise around the work that she was doing. And she had this small little shop in a village in Nairobi, and we used to speak every week on Skype, and despite the miles, our lives seemed quite similar. Until one day she said to me, "Manjit, do you know that women in Africa don't have access to menstrual products?" And of course, in hindsight, I know that because I've worked in a very male-dominated space my entire life, if I hadn't had access to menstrual products, there's just absolutely no way I would have done anything with my life. And I think that was why I was compelled to start the research. So I went to Nairobi, interviewed about 100 girls, and the stories on the ground were horrific, from some girls selling themselves, others using cow dung, animal skin, leaves, grass, whilst others would sit on a hole for a week. And I think I was really just taken aback by the fact that we have so much that we have to put up with as women. And if when our basic human right isn't met, it just feels like, how can this be? So I then went to India, did a similar exercise in India. And what I found in India was this immense shame. If you ask a girl what a period is, the only thing that she knows is that she's dirty. She doesn't know where the blood comes from, why she bleeds, or how to take care of herself. So I decided at that point that I would start doing some work there. We were going to build a workshop in a village, and everything was going well. We'd got the agreement for the funding. We were in planning stages for the building. We were going to start building. And then the chap said that we couldn't use his space anymore because there was a cow there that had given birth to a calf, and that would mean that they would have milk now. And the idea of me implementing a program where we would give them menstrual pads versus fresh milk. It just didn't.
Wasn't even a competition.
Yeah, it wasn't. So in working in India has been quite interesting and challenging, and I've loved every minute of it. But what we realised very quickly was that when there is a natural disaster, we do drop food, we do drop water, but we never drop menstrual products, and women still bleed. And when you start thinking about periods from that perspective, then you realise that, well, okay, what do the homeless women in the UK do? Or women running from a domestic violence situation? Just putting pads in your bag is not something that we necessarily consider. So
As a critical, yeah.
So we started working in the UK. We developed our menstrual education program. We started delivering that quite quickly. In the first year, I remember we had a stand at the Canary Wharf Group. So this is like the financial district of the world. And we had a stand there 3 times in that year. And we were told right at the beginning that while we were promoting the work that we were doing, we couldn't use the word bloody. I'm talking about periods, but we couldn't use the word bloody. So this dignity, this idea of menstruating with dignity, really was compounded by the fact that we understood the cultures that we were working with. If we want to get that conversation going around periods, we have to be very selective around the words that we use. So our education program is just menstruation. It's not attached to reproduction like it seems to be everywhere.
Yeah.
When we work with communities in India, we know that why they don't talk about periods. We don't talk about periods because when you can start having a period, you can start having sex and you can
have a baby.
So it's really important for us right from the onset to be quite careful about who we are as an organisation so that we can go anywhere in the world and do our work without getting attacked for talking about this big elephant in the room. So we've done a lot of research. We've spoken to women in various villages across the country of India. We've spoken to women in the UK, and we all know that we all use toilet paper, for example, in between periods.
Yeah.
We live in the West, but we use toilet paper in between buying
Yeah.
products. And how shocking is that?
Absolutely.
When you we get worried or we feel really uncomfortable with this idea that women around the world don't have access to menstrual products, but we in the UK use toilet paper.
Yeah.
And why do we use toilet paper?
Why?
Why? Because toilet paper is available everywhere.
Exactly.
Some time ago, somebody decided that we would have toilet paper in every single toilet in the country.
And therefore now it's a given.
It's a given. So we believe that menstrual products should be a given because that will eradicate any need for any woman to not have access, right?
Absolutely.
So,
And if it became as commonplace as expecting to have toilet paper in the toilet.
well, we
it
have
would
bins,
be-
right? We have
Yeah,
bins. We even have menstrual bins,
We
menstrual
do.
waste bins.
We do.
Why do we have menstrual waste bins if we don't have menstrual products? We have soap. We have
It's
toilet
really
paper.
ironic, isn't it?
Yeah. So we've been doing lots of different campaigns. Another one that we did where we were successful was this idea of, sometimes we say in the UK, well, we don't really have that much shame. You know, we're quite happy to talk about our periods, but we still stick our products up our sleeves.
When we go to the toilet, we hide them in the sleeve of the jacket.
Yes. Or if we look at advertising, why do the advertisers use blue liquid? When they're
I've
showing
always
us-
wondered that as a teenager when I got my period, I used to remember thinking, my period's red, why is this blue? I never quite got it. It's bizarre, isn't it?
But it perpetuates that
Yeah.
secrecy and shame from a young age, right?
absolutely.
So we launched an advert about 3 years ago now, and that was, I remember speaking to the big boys, I won't mention names, and I'd said to them this very same thing, that don't you think it perpetuates secrecy and shame? And I remember them telling me very clearly, well, I think we've got bigger things to worry about.
When I was talking to Manjit, I started thinking about the time I got my period for the first time. I grew up in a very traditional Kerala family. When I got my first period at the age of 12, my dad decided to go to Sabrimala, which is this holy place in Kerala. What's the big deal? Well, women of menstruating age have not been allowed to enter the Sabrimala temple for the past few centuries. A devotee intending to visit Sabrimala fasts for 41 days. He has to stay pure both in body and mind This, of course, meant that little old impure menstruating me had to be kept away as much as was physically possible for 41 days. Picture this. I'm a young, naive 12-year-old who doesn't understand why her body is suddenly bleeding. Then I'm told that I must not go anywhere near my father, not even accidentally brush past him, because that would invoke the wrath of the deity and cause my father to die. I remember being segregated into a separate space. I had to eat all my meals in the kitchen and sleep in the kitchen too. On no account was I allowed to go anywhere near my father. I felt dirty, just awful, like I was somehow this disgusting, smelly creature that had to be kept away from the rest of the family. And I still remember it. So I feel like that sort of thing marks you for life. And I think that's the sort of thing you're fighting against, isn't it? Mm.
See, if I never call it a fight, because I believe that once it's a lack of education or a lack of knowledge. So, for example, when we're in India and we're talking to girls about the very same idea, I remember once I was speaking to a girl in a slum, and she had told me that she was considered dirty. So they have this tiny, if you imagine a slum, it's like smaller than a box room, and everybody lives in the same room.
Yeah.
And when the girls are on their periods and they're thrown out of the house, basically, because they're considered dirty and impure. And I remember saying to the girl, I said, how do you feel about that? And she said, well, she was the daughter-in-law as well. She was about 22. She had a little girl. I said, how do you feel about that? She said, well, I don't like it. I said, but why didn't you tell them you don't like it? She said, I can't tell them I don't like it. If I tell them I don't like it, they'll throw me out of the house. I said, oh, okay. I said, so you have children? She said, very proudly, yeah, I've got a daughter. And she called her daughter over, and then her daughter came and sat on her lap, and you could see that she was really proud of her 6-year-old girl. And I said, so you haven't been able to change things in your life, but for example, when she grows up, what are you going to do then? I said, are you going to tell her about periods? Oh, no. Okay, you're not going to tell her about periods? No. I said, are you going to call her dirty? And then this look of horror went through her mind, and you could see that it was at that point I knew that change had occurred. She would never call her daughter dirty. And that would be strong enough for her to then carry on making that change, for generations to come. And I think that's what makes everything worthwhile. In that same room, we spoke to another girl, and she said that she didn't go to the temple when she was on her period. And I said, you don't go to the temple? I said, when I'm on my period, that's always the time that I need God the most. She said, you mean you speak to God when you're on your period? I said, of course I do. She said, doesn't he get angry with you? I said, get angry with me? I said, he's the one who made me. So we're not saying to girls, you should go to the temple when you're on your period, but we're letting them believe in themselves. If they need to speak to God, they should speak to God without this idea of that they're dirty or this fear of what will people say. And I think it's that change that is important, because you have to give girls wings. Tell them that they can fly and show them how they can fly. You give them courage. If you tell a girl that she's dirty all her life, think of all the rape numbers. I know it sounds crazy, but there must be a correlation between not feeling fantastic yourself because you're told that you're just a girl or your periods are dirty. Yeah? I believe so. Yeah. And I think if we can impact those numbers by bringing pride back to the foundation of life, then we've done a good job.
Yeah. And even what you described earlier about the woman, and suddenly that realization that maybe my daughter doesn't need to live like this. That's that moment, isn't it? That's the work, and that's the power of the work.
That's the impact, right?
That is the impact, absolutely. Absolutely. I'd love to talk to you more about kind of attitudes towards periods and menstruation within the South Asian community. Do you think some of that taboo that exists in, say, the mother country is very much prevalent here as well among South Asians? Have you seen that in your experience?
Absolutely. I think that's kind of the shocking thing, right? We, despite our education here, we kind of follow our cultural beliefs quite blindly. I think people or girls are beginning to question them.
Which is great. There's an assumption that they're really more open or liberal, but
Yeah, but at the same time, when I've gone into a corporate environment, I remember we were having a discussion around International Women's Day, and there was a sportswoman who was talking about her life as a sportswoman. She was a black rugby player, and it was question time. There were about 300 people in the audience, very white and middle class, and I stood up and asked her how menstruation affect her training. And the looks that I got in the room, where everybody turned around and I could see this sense of, did she just ask her about her period? And I think it's actually quite a liberating moment for myself, because it is really normal.
yeah.
I mean, actually, you might learn something, because I asked that question about training. When we're talking about our periods, we're never taught that there's a good time in the month to make decisions, and there's a time when you should probably just stay away from people you don't like, for example. We're not taught what foods to eat or how to exercise. We're not even told which products to use, right? And
Yes.
there's hundreds of different types of products. I remember speaking to my niece, and my niece told me that she likes the really fat sanitary pads. And I said, do you know what wings are? And she's like, no, what are wings? And I'm thinking, hang on, you live in the UK, but you don't know what wings are on a pad. And it's quite shocking, because I guess you go with whatever you're given right from the beginning.
Yes.
And the manufacturers have loyalty right from the start, right?
Yes. Yes.
So you may use tampons all your life, and you've never even considered using maybe a menstrual cup, for example.
Yeah.
So this lack of education really does impact us.
Yes. I wondered how much the penetration of sort of menstrual cups would be among South Asian women.
Well, it's like tampons. It's kind of the same thing, right?
Yeah,
If you're a community where you don't insert things because of this virginity idea, then you're not going to necessarily use them. So those are the things to be aware of. But as an organisation that understands the community, I'm not going to go to India trying to sell menstrual cups.
Of course.
However, it's a sustainable product,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
You wash it out and you can use it for several years of your life, so you don't have to worry about the cost of periods. So those things should be taught.
Yes, but I suspect that's a bit of a struggle, trying to educate people into kind of menstrual cups when you're trying to even introduce basic sanitary products, right?
I think it's kind of, there's so many different areas around menstruation that we could focus on, and teaching them about insertion is something that we'll leave for someone else. But I think there's, while we're talking about it, and while we're showing the whole, the whole, so that a girl will understand what whole means what, then it's quite easy to talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Can we talk a little bit more about the idea in some South Asian cultures about women on their periods being polluting somehow? You know, in some communities, you're not allowed to touch the food because there's a belief that if a woman on her periods touches the food, it's somehow the food goes off quicker. Have you heard of any unusual kind of taboos?
I mean, I guess they're all unusual, really, from our perspective. But I remember speaking to this girl. She's in Punjab, and she told me that she's not allowed to touch the photographs of saints. And I said, what do you mean? What would happen if you touched the photograph of a saint? And there was this, to plant the seed in her head. What do you think would happen? Is it he's going to curse you, or what is it? Because you just have to challenge it, the idea.
Yes.
And I think sometimes we just forget. When we're challenging, we're not saying, I'm not going to do as you're telling me. All you're doing is questioning.
Yes.
If they can give you an answer that makes sense. So I would say that everything that we're taught around menstruation is cultural.
Yes.
There isn't anything religious. And if anyone says it is, it's interpretation. In old times, when we lived with our extended families, if the daughter-in-law was on her period, it was fine. The mother-in-law would have to cook, right?
Yes.
But now, when we're going back to nuclear families, we've spoken to women in the villages, and they've said, yeah, we used to do that, but we can't do that anymore, because who's going to cook for my husband? So it's almost like are we selecting which taboos we want and which ones we don't want?
The ones that are convenient to us.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting. So there's an international survey by a health app called Clue, And it would seem we've got 5,000 slang words for periods. That's how less we talk about menstruation as an actual topic. So there are some funny ones. We've got, the usual ones. A visit from Aunt Flo. I've heard of this one. On the rag. Self-explanatory. Lady business. Red badge of courage. Mm-hmm. This one was a bit, it's like a solitary expedition. Things like moontide, crimson tide, red wedding, checking into the Red Roof Inn, which sounded quite romantic. There's Shark Week, which I thought was very bloody. And the one that made me laugh the most was a dramatic French version. Apparently it translates as the English have landed.
Bloody.
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 Isn't it awful that in 2019, some of us are still made to feel impure or dirty when we have our period? Why should South Asian girls not be allowed to attend wedding ceremonies or made to feel polluted? Why should young women be shooed out of kitchens because they're told they'll spoil the food being cooked? Yes, these things happen more commonly than we'd like to think. In India, less than 16% of women use feminine hygiene products. In Nepal, 19% of women are banished from their homes to menstruation huts. In Pakistan, 80% of women do not have access to sanitary menstrual products, and a lot of the stigma still exists among South Asians here in the UK. I'm Sangeeta Pillai. Thank you for listening to the Masala Podcast. Masala Podcast is part of my platform Soul Sutras. What's that all about? Soul Sutras is a network for South Asian women. A safe space to tell our stories. A place to reclaim our bodies. To tackle taboos within our culture. To be exactly who we want to be. Get in touch and tell me your stories about your taboos. Check out my website, soulsutras.co.uk, or get in touch via email at soulsutras.co.uk. I'm on Twitter and Instagram. Just look for Soul Sutras. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please subscribe and leave me a nice review. It really helps.